So today we are going to discuss about privacy information management system because it is also privacy is also one of the integral part of the cyber security and the information security. Uh, we need to protect the privacy of the users also, and before going for the protection, first we need to understand what actually the privacy is. Uh, to whom we are calling it as a data privacy, what is the personal data, what is the and how to protect the personal information which we are capturing from the users. Various concept also we are going to learn, what is data controller, what is processor, who would be your joint controller and all. So these are the things what we are going to learn in this session, because there are lots of risks related to the privacy which we are trying to protect. So one of the standard we are referring to one of the ISO standard that is called as ISO 27701. ISO 27701 is fully aligned with the GDPR. The moment we are talking about how to implement GDPR within the organization, because when we are doing the business with UK organizations, there are certain organizations also which do have certain countries do have their privacy laws in their country. So how to protect the privacy information, what are the controls we need to put, how to identify the risk related to the privacy, all these things we are going to learn. So ISO has come up with a standard in later 2019 that is called as ISO 27701. That standard is fully aligned with various privacy regulations which are available across the globe. Apart from this ISO 27701, this standard covers ISO 27001 and ISO 27002 along with some privacy related controls. So this standard is fully aligned with the GDPR. Now, what actually the ISO 27701 is? ISO 27701 is a standard which is fully aligned as per the GDPR requirement to manage the privacy of the user. It contains the structure for the personally identifiable information, which is called as PII. We are calling it as a personally identifiable information is a PII. So this is the brief about ISO 27701. Now, how the ISO 27701 relates to ISO 27001. 27001 standard we have seen in ISO 27001 standard. There are 10 clauses plus uh, there are in ISO 27702 there are controls, really controls domains are there which start from A5 to A18. Total 114 security controls are there. When ISO 27001 combines with privacy extensions for the controller and processor, it will result into the ISO 27701. So this is called as ISO 27701. 90% part is 27001 itself. Along with that, privacy related extension also we are going to add. It will result in ISO 27701. So ISO 27701 is an extension for the ISO 27001. What is the benefit of having ISO 27701? The moment we are implementing ISO 27701 in standard, then it will comply with GDPR related requirement. It is going to protect the privacy of the users, and it is also time saving to go for various regulations country wise. It is also going to save your time while implementing ISO 27701 standard. So there are various legal requirements related to the personal data. Some of the countries related rules and regulations are given here. Like Argentina have their own privacy related framework. Australia have their privacy principle APP, Brazilian Internet Act. In the same way, Bahamas have their own data protection regulation. Canada have, EU have their GDPR. This is the most famous one, General Data Protection Regulation called the GDPR. France have their own, Germany, Hong Kong, India still under progress. They don't have their privacy related framework. Still, this needs to be implemented. This is you can say by next year or this year itself. India also do have their privacy related framework. Japan have their own act. In the same way, various countries do have their privacy related framework. So this, the personal identifiable information of the users needs to be protected. The first requirement of these kinds of standards are, so this is the map view where privacy related laws are there. No, there are certain different terms what we are going to use in the privacy related framework. The first is the data subject. Who is the data subject? Suppose an individual whose data is being collected would be the data subject. Suppose my personal information is collected, my name, phone number, my age, my sex, my gender, and all those information is being collected. In that case, I would be the data subject. Who would be the data controller here? Those who are directly collecting the data would be the data controller. Who, another term is the data processor. What is the data processor? Those who are processing your data, processing the personal information of a user on behalf of a controller, then that person would be a data processor. DPO, what is DPO? DPO is data protection officer. Basically, he or she would be a person who is responsible for protecting the PII, that is called as personally identifiable information within the organization. It's called as DPO. In the same way, supervisory authority, who would be the supervisory authority? Various countries have their own data privacy related framework. There are supervisory authority based in each country. So those would be the supervisory authority. Third country, those the data which is sent outside the European Union or outside the boundary of one of the country, then it will be called as the third country or the third party also we can say. Now what actually the data processing is? We are talking about the data processing. What processing in relation to information or data means obtaining. Data processing means obtaining, recording, holding the information or data, or carrying out any operation or a set of operation on the information of the data. So data processing means here, if we are obtaining any data or we are collecting any data, we are recording those data and we are holding the data in our servers and system. So this would called as data processing. Now, what is data processor? Those who process the data on, if an organization provides a service to another organization, it doesn't necessarily mean that it is acting as a data processor. By providing a service, this doesn't mean that you are a data processor. Service we can provide to a customer, but when a data controller or your customer is sharing certain personal information to you for processing the data, would be called as a your organization would be called as the data processor in that case. Now let's take an example. Suppose sorry, you are being hired by your organization. Organization ABC organization is directly collecting your data, your personal information, name, passport number, your social security number, all those data they are directly collecting from you. In that case, organization ABC would be a data processor, data controller, sorry. Let's suppose organization A, who is directly collecting your personal information, then A would be, they are collecting the information. In that case, they are collecting the information. In that case, that organization A would be data controller. So they are controlling, they are collecting the data. They have the responsibility and obligation to protect their data. Now, suppose uh, you have shared certain data, but what organization A has hired a vendor for doing the background verification check. Your background verification check would be done by the vendor B. So what they are doing, they are collecting your information and they will share your information to the vendor B. Now vendor B will do certain processing on behalf of vendor A. Then in that case, vendor B would be data processor. They would be the processor. This is in this way we can understand what is the data processor and what is the data controller. Difference between GDPR and ISO 27701. In the GDPR, they are saying is it a personal data. ISO 27701 calls it as a name of personally identifiable information. Short form is the PII. The personal data or PII is the same. Data subjects and data principal are the same. Data subject whose data is being collected, data principal is also same whose data is being collected. Data controller, PII controller, data processor, PII processor. So we need not to be confused by seeing these words like somewhere it will be written like PII principal. So PII principal is same as the data subject. In the same way, PII controller would be same as the data controller. PII processor would be same as the data processor. So we need not to be confused by seeing these kinds of terminology. Now, what actually we are talking about the personally identifiable information PII. Every time we are talking about the personal information, personal information. So, what actually is the your PII? Your name, is it a PII? No, your name independently is not a PII, not a personal identifiable information. Or this is also not a. Your name is also not a privacy related thing because it's a public name. Anyone could have a name like me, like you, like anyone. It's a public name. Individually, name is not a privacy information. Now, when your name is combined with your date of birth, now this is your PII, personally identifiable information, or your name would be combined by your location where you are living, your birthday, your social security number, your websites, your mobile number, email, your medical related data, medical history related data, your biometric identifiers are there. So these are the things are called as the personally identifiable information. Also your vehicle number and your account number, all your account, credit card information, what you are holding. These are the things would be called as a PII. Now, there are various regulations available across the globe. Those who are directly controlling the data, they need to protect the PII. This should not be go in public. If there would be any breach identified, so there would be a 4% penalty. Global term, it is a 4% penalty of previous global turnover. So this is a huge penalty what they are going to have on the organization when any data breach is happened. There are certain responsibilities for data processor and data controller, data PI controller, data PI processor. To collect the personal information is the responsibility, or you can say uh, it's uh, it's their job or business. They are collecting your data. what to collect, how to secure data is the fully responsible of data processor. In the same way, the data controller have these kinds of responsibility. In the same way, data processor have certain responsibility also. They need to have proper design or create or implement IT process within the organization so that the data which has been shared with them would not be leaked. They need to use various tools and strategy to gather the personal information, implement security measures for safeguarding the personal information what is being collected, and they are not also supposed to transfer the data without having consent from the data controller to anyone. Now let's take an example of data processor. The HR department of your organization has methods to process the personal data of the candidate and employee that needs to be protected and used, because here HR department is directly collecting the data. The HR department of the organization would be the data control. Some of those HR data processing or data activities for all of them or anything in between could be outsourced. Some of the activities which is done by the HR would be outsourced. The company you outsource the data would be called as the data processor. So from where you can directly understand what actually the data processor and what actually the data controller are. Now, the main we had till now we have seen what is actually the personally identifiable informations are, uh, what is data controller, what is data processor, and if we don't have the proper controls in place, there is a huge penalty from outside uh, outside your organization, or you can say from the uh, authorities, local authorities. They are going to impose you the huge fine on you. That's why it is a very critical to protect the personal information of the user. Now, before collecting any data, are you concerned? When we are collecting any data or any information from the users, then we need to conduct a privacy impact assessment, that is called as PIA. PIA is the same as what we are doing in the risk part when we are trying to identify the cybersecurity related risk. In that risk also we have seen how to identify the risk and how to find out the likelihood and the likelihood or probability of the risk, and what would be the impact. In the same way also, in the privacy related thing, we are also going to do the privacy impact assessment. When you are collecting any data, you need to do the privacy impact assessment, and when accordingly you need to have a controls within the organization. So this is called as the PII. We need to conduct the PII for PIA for the user. Privacy impact assessment framework. The first thing is that identify the need of PIA. We need to identify the why there is need of PIA. That is called as privacy impact assessment. We need to establish the project objective. We need to appoint the project team, the screening question, and consultation. So this is the overall flow of the privacy impact assessment. You need to first identify the PIA. You need to describe the data flows, how the data is being flowing across your organization. The first thing is the identification of why is there a need of PIA or not, privacy impact assessment or not within the organization. Once you have identified the need, then you need to describe the how the data is being flowing across your organization. Suppose you are capturing any data, so suppose HR department is capturing the data of the user. So data is being captured by HR. This is being shared with the IT team. This may be also shared with the software development team sometimes, or the tools and automation team, you can say. And this is also being shared with the admin team. So this would be the flow of the data. And also parallelly, HR team is sharing those data with the third-party vendors, third-party service provider also. So this would be the overall flow of the data. Then we need to identify the privacy risk. Each and every steps would be there when you are capturing any data. So there, the moment you are capturing any data, it must be captured within some of the spreadsheets and all, or whether you are using certain tools. So we need to see whether the tools are capable enough to capture those data, and also there should not be any leakage of the data. These things we need to ensure while capturing the data. These are the things should be identified as the privacy related risk. Then once we have identified the risk, then we need to have the proper solution we need to identify. Then we need to record those solutions. Now integrate the outcomes into the project plan. We need to integrate those outcomes to the project plan. So this would be the overall flow of privacy related framework, or you can say privacy impact assessment. Now, there are certain rights has been given by these kinds of privacy related frameworks to the users. Those rights are there are certain principles and certain rights are there. The principles are there, like start from your accountability. It start from, you can say, legality and transparency and fairness. Purpose limitation for you are collecting those data. Those purpose should be limited. Minimization, you should collect minimum data what you are collecting. In the same way, data accuracy, you can collect accurate data what you are collecting. Storage limitations also, you need to properly store those data. Integrity and confidential, you need to maintain the integrity and the confidentiality of the data. And the most important part is the accountability. If you are collecting any data, if you are processing any data, you are properly accountable for that. These are the certain principles, you can say. Now there are certain rights given to the user. Those rights are right to be informed. If the personal data information of any users are being processed, then you have certain right. The user have certain right. You need to inform those user every time whose data you are processing. Right to access, anytime user can ask to access their data. Rectification also, the user can ask you to rectify the data if there are certain corrections are required. Right to user have also right to that they can ask you to erase the data. Right to the strict processing, if you don't want your data is being processed, then you can also raise these concerns in front of the organization. Right for the data portability, you can also ask organization to port your data to the another organization. Right to object, any point of the time you can object the user. Right in the relation and automated decision making and profiling. Automated decision making, there are certain things which are doing the automated decision making. You do have proper right to stop them also. Now, what actually the consent is? Consent, before collecting any data, you first need a consent from the user that boss, why I am collecting your data. For this purpose, I am collecting your data, and I will secure your data by implementing various technological controls and all. So this is called a consent. You need to first take a consent from the data subjects, and this consent should be proper signed by the users that boss, yes, I am giving this kinds of consent to you. You can process my data. The consent is very important before collecting any data. The moment you are appointing any sub processor, you need to take permission from your controller, and in the same way you need to conduct the data privacy impact assessment. You need to conduct, and then only you will give the job to the sub processors. In the same way, the third control is there. These are the things we are discussing as a control part to protect the privacy. Appointment of DPO. You need to appoint a DPO, data protection officer, within your organization. Apart from these three, consent, DPIA, and you can say appointment of the DPO, all other controls are the same. The cybersecurity related controls what we are going to discuss would be the same. The technical controls would be the same. for these kinds of framework also, the main thing is that we need to identify the risk related to the things. So these are the called as privacy related frameworks, which is aligned as per the GDPR. Now we are going to see how to conduct the DPIA, because these are the major things in this.
Thanks, man.
So this is the register what we are going to use for the PIA, privacy impact assessment. You can say there are certain questionnaires are there before, which we called it as a screening questions. Before you go for the PIA, you need to go with the certain screening questions like what is the data processing activity we are doing, automated decision making is there or not, uh, uh, is you transferring your services to your suppliers or not, how many data subjects do you have, or you can say to whom your data is you are collecting, uh, will it use the information about the individual for the purpose it is not currently used for. So there are certain questions what we need to, you can say, do as part of the screening question. Now another part is that PIA need identification, whether it is where there is any need to capture the PIA. You need to first identify the need in each and every project. What is the need to to do the PIA? What is the processing activities we are doing? What is the consultation process are there? And the fourth thing what we are going to do is to assess the necessity and the proportionality of the project. So all your activities, what we are doing, we need to explain that. Identify the first question it will ask, you need to explain the broadly the project aim. What is your project aim? What are you trying to achieve with these kinds of projects? We need to identify these things. We need to another thing would the next thing would be describe the nature of processing. What kinds of processing you are doing? What is the scope of your processing? Context of the processing, what you are doing. Describe the purpose of the processing. What is your purpose of the processing? Uh, how you are consulting with the relevant stakeholders, and you need to describe whether the data which you are collecting is as per the compliance requirement or not. So there are certain questions we need to go through those questions also, and accordingly we need to identify the risk, what actually the risk are. So once we have identified the risk, then the moment you have identified the risk, now you need to go for the risk management. In the risk management, it is the same as we are doing as the cybersecurity risk, identification of cybersecurity related risk. And this also you are going to identify what is the potential impact. Uh, the first thing is to identify the risk. What is the potential impact on the PII? Suppose you are doing the data processing, further sharing it would be there. So what would be the impact? Impact would be your legal impact would be there, and the contractual breach would be there. In the same way, we need to understand the likelihood and the probability. 5 by 5 matrix here also we are going to use, and accordingly we are going to calculate risk value. Risk value is nothing but multiplication of likelihood and the severity. And accordingly we will identify the risk treatment plan, what actually the risk treatment plan we do have. So once we will have the things, then we'll come to know what are the PIA related risks are and how we are going to mitigate those risks. So this spreadsheet what we are going to use for data privacy impact assessment. So that's all from the data privacy GDPR and ISO 27701 framework.